presentation and discussion with Paul Adams, the Town Finance Director, on a proposed debt management policy. So, Paul, I'll hand the baton.
All right, Tom. Yeah, a few weeks ago I put together this debt management policy with everything we have going on. It is a best practice item, so I thought it would be a great idea to actually put a policy into place to give us some guidelines going forward over the next few weeks and into the future. The first page basically describes the purpose of the policy. It basically provides guidelines for decision making on debt and long-term capital planning. It really goes hand in hand with the 5-year long-term capital plan, which we're also trying to implement. Some of the advantages include the ability to make quality decisions. It helps you to rationalize your decision-making process. It identifies objectives. It demonstrates a commitment to long-term financial planning, which is important in any organization. And it is also regarded very positively by the rating agencies. We are looked at on an annual basis by Moody's, which you may or may not realize. And they actually contact me, they take a look at the audited financial statement, the annual update document, and a continuing disclosure document that our consultant Municipal Solutions puts together. And they actually rate us. They basically give us our credit rating each year. So some of the objectives of the policy. So the town will finance capital projects through the issuance of debt for the shortest period practical. Typically, a project will be assigned what's called a PPU, or a period of probable usefulness. As I said, that you're actually restricted. You can't finance beyond that PPU date. And as I said a minute ago, it goes hand in hand with the 5-year capital plan. Some of the purposes for which debt may be issued. If you get into an emergency situation, you can certainly issue debt. This sets forth some guidelines where we would like to limit, or actually put a minimum amount of $250,000 for the issuance of debt. If there was a need for under that amount, hopefully we could finance that through fund balance or through some other means. Item E, which mentions that once again it ties into the capital plan. There are various legal limits, statutory limits. There's an overall limit of 7% of the full assessed value, and that's based on a 5-year average. For the town, that's basically approximately $290 million is the overall limit on debt. For this policy, we've actually put in some limits. The aggregation of debt, according to this policy, we'd like to see that limited to about 8 times the receipts from taxation, which for the town is about $161 million. General purpose debt, we'd like to limit to 4 times, which is about $80 million. And water pollution control purposes, we'd like to limit that to about 5 times annual taxation, which is about $101 million. With what we have coming up, we'll be coming right up on that number. So I guess we could determine. This is our policy. We could determine if we actually wanted to make that 6 times, but 5 times does fit. Just to tell you where we're currently at as far as debt goes. At the end of 2022. We had outstanding serial bond debt of about $16 million. We're going to be borrowing through a bargain participation note sometime in the next 2 months, which will probably finish 2023 with about $65 million in debt, and 2024 with about $140 million if we put through everything that's currently on the table. The various types of debt. as I mentioned, bond anticipation notes are typically used to finance projects that are short-term debt. They're one year at a time. Typically, you can do a band for 5 consecutive years, and at that point it needs to be rolled into a serial bond. There's lease purchase financing. That would be used for things like copiers, exercise equipment, things like that. That's what typically was known as a capital lease, where you would be, it's structured as a lease, but you're actually purchasing the equipment. On this page, long-term debt, GO bonds, that's, as I just said, once the bands mature, once you reach the max of 5 years, then it is rolled into a serial bond, which is typically what we've done. There are some restrictions on debt issuance. You cannot actually get into a derivative agreement. Derivatives are basically a financial contract whose value is dependent on an underlying asset. So it's almost like you're giving up ownership of an asset to repurchase it back. Those were outlawed a number of years ago, as they do come with quite a bit of risk. The structural features of debt. We'd like to target the annual debt increase to 5%. As a general rule, but with what we have currently going on this year, we'll certainly exceed that 5%. But as a policy, I think that's a good goal. Debt repayment. We would like the town will endeavor to structure the new bond issues so that at least 50% at a minimum is repaid over a 15-year period to try to limit the amount that accumulates. And then we have some credit objectives. These are basic calculations that you can do to basically to kind of see where you're at. So as far as the debt as a percentage of assessed value, we're currently at 0.40%. I expect to be at 1.6% at the end of 23 and 3.4% at the end of 24. Debt per capita, we're currently at about $352. It's going to go to about $1,434 for 23 and about $3,088 for 24. And there are some other debt service indicators that can be used just to determine if your level of debt is appropriate. Method of sale. Typically, the bands and the bonds are sold through competitive sale. That's handled by Municipal Solutions, our consultant, in conjunction with Harris Beach, our legal counsel, bond counsel. But you can do negotiated sales and private placements. I can't say that I've ever seen that happen within government, within this government, within this time. It's typically is competitive sale. Then there is an EFC as well. The EFC offers financing options. So that's always an option for a low interest loan. Selection of consultants. As I mentioned, we currently use Harris Beach for bond counsel and Municipal Solutions. This just provides some guidelines that they'll work. You want a nationally recognized bond counsel firm, and you want a consultant that certainly has the proper SEC and MSRB credentials. Refunding of long-term debt. This is just another word for refinancing. Our bonds are structured so they can be refinanced or refunded at any time. So interest rates are running a bit high right now, so in the future, if interest rates drop, we'll be able to refund those bonds or refinance those. Section K discusses arbitrage. essentially arbitrage, and it does not allow the town to, the rules do not allow the town to borrow money at a low interest rate and turn around and invest that money. So that's something we're going to need to be careful of in the next year or two. We can earn a little interest, but we have to keep it minimal. And that is something that is monitored by our consultant. Section C, the continuing disclosure. Each spring, I actually go through this process with Municipal Solutions. It's an extensive document that has many, many details about the town, including population and largest taxpayers, and it incorporates our audit report. This continuing disclosure is required by the SEC, since the bonds are ultimately sold to the public. They typically are sold through two mutual funds, so in turn, they become investments of the public. Section I just states that we will make an effort to integrate this with the long-term capital plan. Investment accounting proceeds just basically will comply with New York State and federal laws. So that's essentially the key elements within the policy. As I said, I think it's important. I'd like to see the town adopted sometime in the next few weeks, and I think it fits in nicely. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know what those are.
I want to spend more time with it and take a look at it. I tried to highlight everything that you had highlighted.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Attention.
There's a lot there.
And there is a lot to look at, but I just want to thank you because I know that you've been very instrumental in guiding us in developing policies such as fund balance and that. And I think that these are really good steps that we need to take. So I want to thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Paul. Very appropriate to put this together.
Thanks. Yeah, it'll reflect very positively, and it's something that the rating agencies look for. It's definitely would be a positive.
Paul, quick question. This 12 pages, is this a template you got from the comptroller's office?
I actually started with a template that I got from Municipal Solutions.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting, you had said, you made many comments during the presentation about how we're in an interesting time right now at the town with some of the bonding and that and all that. I think it was on page 4, you commented on the water pollution, in this proposal it's 5 times annual receipts, which based on us would be 101 million, based on the current receipts. And you said, well, you know, we could change that. This is a draft to 6 times. Well, I'm not, in a vacuum, I'm not looking to change it. Where did these 8 times, 4 times, and 5 times come from? Is that?
Yeah, it is the recommended level.
These are the recommended. Okay.
We can leave it at 5 times.
I also thought, I don't know, it's as much as a question as a comment on that same page, the legal limitations. And Charlie, you just went, I'm new to this still. I know I can't see the 3.5 years. Did anybody on this board know that there is a 7% of a 5-year average of the assessed?
It comes up once every 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, somebody will ask that or it'll come up. Yeah, I've seen that before, and I know myself, and I can't recall exactly in what context, but I know I definitely have as town attorney.
Wow.
Across this particular section, yes. Well, certainly Article 8 is well known to anybody who's dealing with the state constitution, but yes, it's right in our New York State Constitution.
Yeah, I did that. And obviously, when you look at our full assessed value, 100% value of the town, that 7% is $290 million. Legally, we can't go into debt more right now.
Right.
Well, luckily we're not,
Actually-
we're not gonna be approaching that.
No, actually, I think the way it comes up, and Paul will know this too, oftentimes I have to do a letter stating or confirming I don't know what you would say, the viability of the town's finances, so
Right.
it's a boilerplate letter.
Sure.
But for much of the bonding, I'll have to do a legal counsel's, and of course, I'll refer to Paul because he's the expert, but then I'll sign off, but that's really where this comes.
Okay. Other than that, Paul, I'll have to go back in my notes, but you did a presentation on the fund balance policy draft to this board 2 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we went back and forth, like Patty just said, got to look at it, absorb it, think about it, and then come up with, questions or comments that may be adapting, this, that. We then came up with the final fund balance policy. I don't remember the time frame, whether it was like the board meeting after your presentation or if it was within 2 months. I think we would all agree on this board that fund balance policy has really assisted us in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It has become part of the overall town budget
It's
policy.
been helpful.
It really has been. And, I use the analogy that instead of figuring out on that fund balance policy, well, how much should we take out of the fund to lower taxes, whatever, and putting your finger up in the air, just subjectively coming up with that, where the configuration of the town board changes all the time, that finger in the air changes all the time.
Right.
Having something in writing, it's not like the town board could, in the future, change that fund balance policy, but having it in place really, it sets the tone for how to fiscally manage the town in a responsible way. And I think, and you and I have talked, I think this debt management policy is right up the same alley.
Yeah, it is. I
So,
think most towns don't have a debt policy, but
yeah,
it's good practice.
I'm anxious to get it in place. I do want to see what process we took during the fund balance policy, just so we have a benchmark of how quickly between when we first presented that to the board to adoption
Yeah.
did it take. And,
That was at least a month.
yeah, so.
It takes some time to look at it.